There we go. Good morning and welcome back for our Module 2 live session. What we're going to be doing today is really digging in to the California World Language Standards for public schools. You've done a little prep work. Hopefully you had an opportunity to look at some of the little introductory modules that went into some of the background and so on and so forth. You want to make sure that, I think everybody has pretty much checked their mics already. You want to have a couple of documents with you. One is the, and mine looks a little bit different from yours, but the copy of the standards that we had in, there we go, in the module. And this is not the one that the CDE has on their website, and I'll explain why when we get to it and start using it, because we're using the original draft version because of the way it's formatted. The other two options for documents were either the Español 2 travel fair or the Historical People French 3 fall research activity, because we'll be using those. Hopefully we're going to get to that, and if not, you'll do that on your own in an alignment practice a little bit later today. Okay. All right. So there we go. So what are our objectives today? We're going to, hopefully by the end of this, you will be able to describe the structure of the standards document, explain some of the main important concepts in the standards, and ultimately begin aligning activities. In this case, we've got some sample activities, but then ultimately aligning your own activities to the standards. Okay. All right, just to remind ourselves of who we are. Right, Julia said that the one you'd seen online didn't have the chart, and that's because the CDE has their own rules about how everything has to look. So we're still using the old version, but you can go get that later if you need to. Okay.
Yeah, that's the one I already had.
Okay, good. All right, so let's go ahead and use the chat, and of course the chat is really small, so once the messages start flowing, go ahead and send a message, remind us of where you teach and what subjects and levels you teach, okay? And we'll ask you to turn off your green microphone when you're not talking, just to make sure that we don't have background. Okay. Jennifer, what are you doing?
I thought maybe if I hit return, I could make it like, anyway.
And
entered, though.
Epic fail. I mean? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yes, and Jennifer just went back to school this week. So we were talking earlier about, okay, Julia is at Elk Grove. And Julia, you've been there a couple years now?
This is my second year.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
At Elk Grove High.
At Elk Grove High.
But I replaced Morgan when she was gone. So.
Oh, yeah, that's
Sheldon.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then Karen when she was pregnant. So I've been in Elk Grove for a bit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Santa's at Foothill High School. Wow, you've got a lot. And Daphne apparently doesn't teach. She just says her name. And Lisa's at Rio Linda. There's Daphne. Okay, Cal State Bernardino. And Valerie, you were working with teacher prep, is that right?
Yes, I do have a class of language teaching theory.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Great, wonderful. Okay, very good. So let's go ahead and continue. We can either do it in the chat box or we can go ahead and talk on the microphone, but I'm interested in any questions you might have about the standards based on what you know right now or may have picked up from previous experience. are there any questions that you have right now that hopefully we will ultimately be responding to, but I want to make sure that we do respond to them if we don't have that built in, okay? So you can either chat a question, or if you'd like to turn on your mic and talk, that would be fine too. Seeing none. Wonderful. It means that our module is so self-explanatory that it doesn't bear any repeating. I love it. Okay, as we go through today's session, if you have a question, please feel free to interrupt and ask, because as they come up, I don't want to lose any potential, areas that need clarification as we go through. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Looking at the organization, the actual physical organization of the standards is important so that you know how to read them, because our standards, if you haven't had a chance to flip through them, you will have noticed that our standards look very different from the standards of, for example, English or math or science. We have 5 categories in our standards. They are content, communication, cultures, structures, and settings. Yes, okay, Lisa, thank you very much for bringing that up. Because if you take a look at these five areas, if you're familiar with the actual, what were called 5 C's, they're now called the World Readiness Standards, are there similarities between them? And the answer is yes, because the actual standards were one of the documents that informed the process of the team that put together the standards for California. And the standards for California were adopted in 2009. And so they've been around for a while, and we've had some interaction with them. Now, just to make things more complicated, there is a bit of a movement now. The political atmosphere in Sacramento, let's put it that way, is starting to be more open to adopting the national standards as a document that we would use here in California. So there's a possibility that in a few years we may actually adopt the actual World Readiness Standards, in place of our content standards. But the political atmosphere when these were adopted was very different, and they absolutely were against adopting any outside documents. They always wanted to have a California original document. So that's the kind of the history behind it. There's not an exact direct correlation between the 5 C's and the California content standards, but bear in mind as you're going through this process today that there are echoes of those actual 5 C's in the California standards. Okay. All right. So 5 categories: content, communication, cultures, structures, and settings. And each of these categories contains one or more element. And elements are the actual line items that describe what happens in a world language learner's process. Okay. So let's start with content. Content boils down to a wide variety of topics that are age and stage appropriate. We're going to talk about stage. We did already talk about stage a little bit in the pre-viewing. Can anyone get on their microphone and tell me what is the, can you describe to me the difference between a level and a stage? Anyone want to be brave?
Okay, I can try.
Okay, we got Valerie and Lisa. Let's start with Lisa.
Oh, I was hoping you'd start with Valerie. Okay.
Nope.
Okay, the level is the like grade or ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th, or I mean like French or Spanish 1, 2, 3, or 4, right?
Okay.
And the stage is what they're able to do.
Exactly.
Stage 1 being really formulaic, and stage 2 sentence, and then going up to paragraph and essay.
Exactly. Very nicely described. Thank you very much. Valerie, did you want to add anything else to that?
No, everything is perfect. Just maybe that we very rarely go beyond stage 2 at high school, but that's about it.
Exactly. And I think one of the biggest takeaways from this module should be the reality check of what is possible to accomplish in the relatively short amount of time that we have access to our students. If we have a student in a 4-year program, which is often a luxury, yeah, you're absolutely right. They're going to be somewhere in stage 2, not even mastering stage 2 by the end of their 4 years. So that reality check really shines a light on not panicking about what can they do, but being realistic about what they can do. Okay?
Yeah, that was one of the questions that I had because it was in the little assessment for the module. So the answer would be it was stage 2 would be appropriate.
Yes.
That native speakers generally operate at stage 3, and then stage 2 would be our aspiration for 4 years of high school.
Right. A native speaker program in certain content areas may peak into stage 3. The best barometer that we have actually is all of us in our native language operate day to day, nothing special at stage 3. And so if we're operating at stage 3 in English, for example, I'm in English, I'm operating at stage 3, my students are definitely not operating in stage 3 in French, that's for sure. And even in English, because of their age and life experience, they may not always be operating in stage 3 in English at this point because they're 16 years old. I operate on a much wider, broader schema because I have more life experience. So that also helps us to manage the reality check on stages.
Yeah. I think that one of the things that confused me was just for, like, in terms of students who are taking the AP test, that since they are writing essay length, that length sounds stage 3.
What they're doing is they're not really doing true essay. They're doing something that has been sort of
like
scripted.
A formula.
Yeah,
like
exactly. And so it does start to get a little bit, it's like, oh, they are writing paragraphs. Yeah, they're paragraphs that we've taught them how to write. They're not spontaneously doing that. And the other thing about AP level, because a lot of us teach AP and know the AP, ACTFL actually uses a different terminology than stage. Stage, again, California had to be original and so on. ACTFL has novice, intermediate, and advanced, and then they break it down into novice low, novice mid, novice high, intermediate low, mid, high, and so on and so forth. AP, to be successful on the AP exam, your students need to be able to operate at intermediate mid. So it's really not, it's not something, and that's on the new tests. The old, especially the old French test that was all nitty-gritty grammar.
Yeah.
They couldn't.
That I was successful on.
Right, I was successful, but that's because I'm a grammar geek, you know.
Yeah.
But nowadays with the communicative focus, kids can be successful. Yeah.
Past subjunctive.
Right, they don't have to do the interrogative subjunctive mode and blah blah. So.
And it's okay.
Exactly, it's perfectly okay. So getting back to this age and stage appropriate, if you think about a student that might begin learning French in kindergarten versus a 9th grader who is beginning their French study, the topics that they're going to deal with are going to be different potentially because of the age appropriateness. And then of course the stage appropriateness as well. So that's what content is. All right, so here's the question. 1.1 in content. So it's stage 1, and it's number 1 in the list. Students address discrete elements of daily life. So what topics could go here? I'd like you to turn on your mic and name a topic. Don't cheat and look at the content standards, Julie.
I was just looking.
Yeah.
Oh, it's right there. You asked it.
I can see you. No, I can't really see you. I can hear you. So what would be a topic for content, discrete elements of daily life?
Buying stuff.
Buying things, okay? Valerie?
Introducing yourself and other people. Oh,
Mhm.
introduce.
Absolutely.
Talking about family and friends.
Family and friends. Santa, you want to throw one in?
Celebrations.
Okay.
Yes.
Eating. Talking about food.
Food. Very good. All right. Now let's turn to in the document page 5 through 7. Okay? So now you have permission. Page 5. And this is what mine looks like. It has a chart. And this is why we are using this old version, because we like the side-by-side chart. It makes it a lot easier to do a comparison on it. The state of California wants it to be stage 1, all the bullet points, then stage 2, all the bullet points. So you can't do a comparison. So page 5 has the overarching statement of what is involved in content. There's a paragraph that describes content, and then there is this: students acquire information, recognize distinctive viewpoints, and further their knowledge of other disciplines. And you'll notice that 1, 2, 3, and 4 exactly the same, because they're going to do this. They're just doing it at a more increasingly proficient ability level. Then the discrete elements of daily life. If you turn to page 6 and 7, you're going to see this chart, and it gives you the different content areas, but they're not limited. Okay, you could find some content that might not be on here and add it in your own mind. Okay, so for example, greetings and introductions, we talked about that one. Family and friends, pets, home and neighborhood, celebrations, holidays, and rites of passage, calendar, seasons, and weather. Whoops, let's go back. No, go back, thank you. So these are just a few, but you can see that there's parts of the body, there's jobs, there's vacation and travel, and almost any piece of content that you're going to work with your students on can fit into one of these categories. Okay. All right, so I would like you to look at, let me see, which one do I want to look at? I want to look at C on page 6, okay? Starts with pets in stage 1. Excuse me. Go across C, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4. And if you have the CDE version, you're going to have to flip pages. What do you notice that happens to this content area as you move across the stages?
Well, it goes from like personal to global, which is what most of them do.
Good. Any other observations?
You might increase your vocabulary.
You're definitely going to increase the vocabulary. You start very small, and then you get a larger list, okay? What happens here is stage 1, as Julia pointed out, is all about me. Me, and my immediate surroundings. Stage 2 begins to go outside of my own community and my own experience. For example, our students are primarily metropolitan dwellers, but now we're going to talk about zoo and farm animals. They may not have a lot of experience with farm animals in their own personal activities, but stage 2, they are starting to be able to look outside of their immediate community. Stage 3, animals and their habitats. Now we're talking potentially about places around the world that we've never visited, but we have the ability to talk about them now because we can get beyond our own personal experience. And then finally, endangered species, which for most of our students, they never have any connection with that because it's not part of their reality. Okay. And you see that happen in all of these categories where it goes across from stage 1, really about your own personal experience, to a more global perspective. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and look at communication. And communication is fundamentally conveying and receiving messages. In what format? It could be oral, it could be written, it could be something that you listen to or view. Okay. There are 3 modes of communication, and this is really important to have a good grasp on this. There's the interpersonal, communication, which is a shared activity among people who are using the language. So the most common example of that would be a conversation or perhaps an email message thread. Okay. There's the interpretive communication where it comes into the user of language, but there is no interaction. So this would be listening or viewing a video or reading a text. And then there's presentational, which rather than coming into the user of language, the user of language is sending the message out. And that would be most often speaking and writing. In this case, we have mentioned signing because ASL also falls into these content standards as well. Okay. So any questions about these three communicative modes? Okay. Oh, thank you, Jennifer, for posting a link in the to the World Readiness Standards on the ACFL website. And we'll try to get a link up in our modules as well so that you have some access to those. Okay, oh my goodness, I missed a whole bunch, Jennifer. Thank you. Okay, sometimes Spanish 1 feels like a kindergarten class. You're absolutely right. Okay. All right, so let's talk about communication. On page 8, if you go ahead and turn to page 8 of your standards document, you see communication. You see the paragraph describing what communication is. And then you see 1.0, which is stage 1. You see 1.1, and you see 1.2 and 1.3. So we have 1.0, which describes the type of language. And Lisa, you had mentioned earlier formulaic. Formulaic language is memorized chunks. So they are simply memorized. They may be able to say je m'appelle. They have no idea that that is a reflexive verb and that's the pronoun for the first person singular and so on and so forth. They just have je m'appelle as a chunk of language that they can spit out. Okay. Formulaic, take a look across for stage 2 in 2.0, and you see created, which are sentences and strings of sentence, literally taking apart those memorized chunks and putting them back together in a different format to create new communication. Then you have stage 3, which is planned language, where we're operating more at a paragraph level. And then finally stage 4, which our students are not going to be at stage 4 with us, extended language, where you're stringing paragraphs together. Okay. Now take a look at 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. Which one is the interpretive mode of communication? Between 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3, which one is the interpretive mode of communication?
1.2.
Number 2, 1.2. Okay. So which one is the interpersonal communication? Someone else?
One point one?
Yep, exactly. And then 1.3 obviously is going to be? It's almost a trick question.
Presentational.
Presentational, exactly.
Presentational.
Exactly. Now, if you look at the chart on page 8, what do you notice as you go across from 1.1 to 2.1 to 3.1 to 4.1?
Anybody else got a frozen screen?
Not
Or
me.
Christine?
Not me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
hang
can't
on.
hear anything.
Can you not hear me?
Right, I can't hear anything.
Frozen again.
Hang
Can you
on.
hear us, Christine?
Yes. Hang on. Audio will not be recorded during this time. Oh, come on. Attempting to reconnect. Okay. Let's see.